Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait just a moment as a lot of people are coming in at this moment. We'll start in about 1 minute. Okay, good morning. We have over 100 people on already and many coming in. Delighted to sort of see you all today. Hope you are well and safe, taking good care of yourself and that your family and those close to you are good. Before we begin our discussion, I just want to remind you that Temple Emanu-El is available to you in so many ways. The clergy are available to speak with you. Volunteers for shopping are there or for other needs. There is also a COVID-19 relief fund, which is there to help congregants who need to remain members of the temple and are unable to. Also there to support food needs and other immediate financial needs of members of the temple. And also its purpose is to help the temple sustain itself during these difficult months. A couple of things coming up. At 8 o'clock tonight, there will be a Yom HaShoah Holocaust Memorial program. It's probably going to last just a little more than half an hour. Our members and friends, Fred Pollack, Lori Goldsmith-Heitner, and Miriam Verga will be participating. If you're not registered, the link for this will be up in the chat room. It's there now. And there'll be an e-blast today to all of you, and you can register from the e-blast as well. Coming up, Rabbi Mary Zamor will be discussing a Jewish response to hoarding toilet paper and related matters on this Thursday at 7:30. Rabbi Prosnit meets with Mandy Zucker, member of our temple, on COVID-19 on Friday around the lunch hour, and that'll be in the e-blast. Rabbi Prosnit will also meet with John Bramnick, our member and minority leader of the New Jersey State Assembly, in the coming weeks. And in May, you may want to put this down, on May 11, Rabbi Eric Yaffe is going to join me in a discussion on current situation in Israel. And on May 18, Rabbi Prosnit and I will have a discussion. I want to thank Jackie Gruscott again, our marvelous, amazing communications manager, for setting this up and for being with us, helping us with the chat room and the like. So it is a tradition to study Pirkei Avot, ethics of the fathers, during this period of between Passover and Shavuot. I'd like to begin with a passage from Pirkei Avot that many of you know is one of my favorites. B'makom she'ein anashim hishtadel lihiyot ish. Roughly translated, in a time when nobody is stepping up, or too few people are stepping up to the plate, be there to respond to the need. I'm amazed, overwhelmed really by how so many of you are stepping up, sewing masks, gowns, calling shut-ins, shopping for family, for friends, for neighbors. It's a beautiful, beautiful expression of caring and of love. And you are stepping up. In this place where not everyone is necessarily doing his or her part, so many of you are. And for me, that's a segue to our guest today. A few years ago, Shelley Brindle, private citizen, took a good look at her town of Westfield and of the larger world and what was happening, and she came to the conclusion that she needed to step up, that she needed to be a part of the solution to the problems that we face, and that was before the virus. And she's done precisely that. She served now as mayor of Westfield. How long, Shelley? Is it 2 years? 2 years. And she's a wonderful friend of Temple Emanu-El, of Rabbi Prosnit, of myself, and so many of you. My next door neighbor loves you. Lots of people do. And I'm one of those. So Shelley, thank you very much for being with us today. As I said, we have about 120, 140 people on this today, which is really very, very special. So I'm going to ask you to begin, if you would, by bringing us up to date on the town's response to CV-19. And in particular, perhaps you could speak a little about our most vulnerable citizens and what we're doing to help them.
Absolutely. And thank you, Rabbi, for inviting me. This is incredibly privileged. Also, I'm just so happy to have a reason to shower and get dressed and know it's Monday. So it's thank you for that, and for all those who are here remotely. I'm so impressed that you've got over 100 people that are on these Zoom calls. It's quite amazing. And I would be remiss if I didn't start out by a big congratulations to Rabbi Prosnit on his ascension to being the senior rabbi. But I most importantly want to congratulate your congregation for making such an incredible, smart, and forward-looking decision. Rabbi Prosnit joins, I think, a new generation of faith leaders that you're seeing all over town, and I'm really excited for a reimagined ministerium that's going to tap into all this new energy, I think, from a new generation of faith leaders that could really make a big difference in our community. So congratulations to all of you for making that decision, and I'm thrilled to be working alongside him going forward. So I wanted to make sure I said that.
I like to say amen to that.
Yes, there we go. And again, you mentioned stepping up in the community, and yes, that's right. I decided to step up over 2 years ago to run for mayor. This is not quite what I imagined what I was stepping up into, but I will tell you, the seat where I sit, it's an incredible privilege to get a window into this community and how people rise to the occasion. And it's I think when we get past this, it's going to be amazing to reflect back and really think about it. If I think about how all the goodness that's happening in our community, I quite frankly get a little emotional even thinking about it. So the generosity of, like you said, as mask makers and gown sewers and shoppers and so forth, it's really unbelievable. So thank you, all of you who are here today that I'm sure are participating in many of those initiatives. I also would be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the heroes that are emerging from this crisis. And of course, it's always we can always count on our amazing first responders and so forth. But, there's the unsung heroes who are the grocery store workers, the postal carriers, the garbage people. Like, it's amazing how these people continue to step up so that we can continue to really have some semblance of a normal life in isolation. So I think, there will be a time when they could all be honored appropriately, but it's really important to remember and thank them for the work that they're doing. I also just, on that same vein, the generosity of our community is unbelievable. And then I'll get into some of the specifics that we're doing, but it was very evident early on, certainly when we started to close our downtown, the devastation that it was going to wreak on our business owners. Especially at a time when I thought we were just about to reach a point when we had a plan for our future and turning the corner. So it just really was a dagger to the heart for me. So one of the very first things we did was start what we called our We Love Local Fund through the Westfield United Fund, and kicked it off with a porch concert by lead singer of the Goo Goo Dolls, who you guys may or may not know. But within 3 weeks, we have raised over $200,000. And what the beauty of that is, we got cash in the hands of these businesses within days of that. And the notes that we got back from our business owners, one day we're going to post many of them, because it was as much about the fact that the community cared about them as it was about the cash in hand. And they said it was when things were feeling so desolate to them, getting a check, whether it was for $500 or $2,500, was just what they needed to find the strength to keep going. So it was really an unbelievable message to them, and generosity from our community. So thank you all for supporting that. There's also been a grassroots initiative called Feed the Front Lines by a couple, Michelle and Stephen Boyce, who started an initiative where they are taking donations to buy food from our restaurant owners to actually feed healthcare workers in the region. I think I saw last night they've raised over $70,000. They've, I think, sent over 5,000 meals. And it's been an unbelievable level of the community coming together and supporting our downtown restaurant, all of our restaurants at the same time. So that has been incredibly inspirational. So I thought I'd answer your question a little bit about some of the things that we're doing. And then I thought I'd give you just an update on the virus from Westfield's perspective on what we see as happening, and then we can talk about path forward. But what's been really challenging about this particular virus, unlike, I almost say it's incredibly difficult, most likely because of the uncertainty of it all. It's one thing, even after Hurricane Sandy, as horrible as it was, we knew what we were dealing with, we knew what the time frame was, and we knew what we had to do to get moving. I think this notion of we don't know how big, how long, or when makes it really hard and provides a lot of anxiety for people. The other challenge on the volunteer front, people's natural reactions when things like this happen is, how can I help? And we're used to doing things like, let me go volunteer at the senior center or the community center, or let me go do this. But we're trying to discourage anything that requires any type of level of public engagement. So it's another level of anxiety, because our natural need to help and be of service is somewhat limited by the nature of what it is we're dealing with. So, but we have been able to come up with things in a lot of various ways, including, I've been very concerned about the senior citizen population. And in collaboration, I think, with the temple, and the ironic part was we were supposed to host a big senior expo at the temple. I think it was going to happen in a couple weeks. And of course, that's been, we've had to cancel it, but the temple has been an incredible partner with us on our new senior initiatives. And many of you might be familiar. I started a senior advisory council a year and a half ago, specifically to focus on really making our seniors feel like they're a really included part of the community, but very importantly, trying to come up with strategies how we can retain them in the future. So there's a big initiative called Lifelong Westfield that they've been rallying around. And so the Lifelong Westfield team, they've also been doing daily check-ins with the seniors that we have who have replied to our calls for contact information. I'm going to share that information with you in just a second. Not only have they been doing daily check-ins for seniors, but they also, the high school chorus has actually volunteered, and they are doing songs on request. So if they've been sending out notes to our seniors, if anybody wants to hear one of their favorite songs, these high school folks from the high school chorus have been calling and singing to seniors. So it's been a really great thing, not only for the senior, but the high school choral members are feeling like, they're doing some good. And I've seen some of the videos, and they're adorable. As you might also know, our Westfield Police Department, they converted. We had 3 school resource officers who were the police officers that stayed in the schools, and clearly with the schools being closed, they don't have a place to go to. So they've been officially what we call dedicated now to community resource officers. And they're the ones that whenever anybody needs anything, whether you need a trip to the grocery store, or prescription delivered, or any type of essentials. These community resource officers have been rising to that, to those requests. And they've done anything. I'm just looking at, prescription delivery. They're doing any errand task. I think we dropped off thermometers on someone's front porch. And so if anybody wants to either need that senior assistance from our police, or to be on the list of our senior advisory council for check-ins or information, quite frankly, even after this is over, this group is doing other things too, including we provided like free safety walking vests in collaboration with the police department. There's events that they're hosting. And I think now the senior council, I've heard, is they're actually creating these small online chats with like 10 to 12 seniors at a time, just so people can feel connected to each other, and they're organizing that. So Jackie, maybe you can put this in the chat room, but if you want to be on any of these lists, you can email westfieldnjseniors@gmail.com if you have email, or you can call 908-301-1287. Perfect.
Great.
908-301-1287 is the number you can call. And there's another thing too. I don't know if you all I do these daily updates, and I have been doing COVID. They appear not only on social media, but we have an email list, and they also get forwarded out to email for people who have signed up for any of our town updates. So, and you can selectively choose. You can it could just be my updates, or you can also get tax updates or anything you want. So if, Jackie, if you could put this up there too. So if you want to sign up for any of our town updates, it's, you just go to westfieldnj.gov/town updates. And you can, perfect. And
That's great,
and
Jackie. I don't know how you do it so fast, Jackie.
I was like, wow, that's amazing.
That's amazing.
Because I talk fast too, and she got that. So, and you can, and like I said, a daily email will get pushed out to you with all the updates. Some of them I'm going to give to you in just a second. But, and then if you don't want them anymore, you can easily unsubscribe. But we also send out emergency notifications and all kinds of things. So I would encourage you to do that. And if you know someone who could benefit from any of this, please forward it on to your friends and family and so forth. We have that, going back to the seniors for a minute, we have a lot of caregivers that actually are on our seniors list, just to make sure that they know what's going on. So please feel free to do that. So that's that. And I thought I would move into giving you just an update on the virus and where it stands today. And hopefully we can talk about a path forward, and then we could talk about, I like talking about the future because it's
there is a future.
There is a future, and I like talking about it. So we're going to spend some time on that. But let me just give you an update on the COVID status in Westfield as it stands to date. We have 174 confirmed cases in Westfield. Unfortunately, that includes 17 fatalities. We are seeing a flattening of the curve, in that just one indication is Overlook Hospital. At Overlook Hospital, at their peak on April 7th, they had 311 hospital beds with COVID patients. They're now down to 254 as of Saturday. And one thing that you guys may or may not be aware of, but our health department is a regional health department. So it's called the Westfield Health Department, but it actually supports 8 different municipalities. So our health director, Megan Avalone, actually has insight into not only what's going on across these 8 municipalities, but she sits on the governor's task force for COVID. So she also gets a real window.
Shelley, would you mention some of the towns that are part of the coalition?
Summit, Fanwood, Morristown. It's not just Union County.
Garwood, I believe.
Garwood, yes, exactly. Gosh, it's escaping me. Milburn, I think, is one. But yes, it's not just Union County. And so that's part interesting, is she gets insight into what's happening like in Morris County and others. And because she sits on the state board, she also gets a window into that. So we're very incredibly fortunate in Westfield. She's also president of the the county, municipal and county Board of Health officials. So she gets all kinds of information, relevant data. So we are incredibly lucky and fortunate to have Megan be in Westfield. But one of the things that she mentioned is the trend that they're seeing, the curve is flattening. Most of the new cases are coming from, unfortunately, but not surprisingly, healthcare workers and their families, as well as long-term care facilities, which we know, and we can talk about that. That's the next big issue that we're dealing with. So, but what that indicates is the community spread, as we knew it, has slowed down. I don't want to say it stopped completely, but they're not seeing random cases of community spread. What they're seeing now is people who have a direct link to, again, healthcare workers, or in this case, long-term and senior care facilities. And that is and remains a very big problem and a very big challenge. And we have two senior care facilities in Westfield. One is the Genesis facility, which is on Lambert's Mill, right on the Scotch Plains border. And the other one is Sunrise. We also have a significant, many of you might know, Boynton Housing, which is our Westfield senior housing. They're not considered in the database a care facility because they are like independent apartments that people rent, and they don't. So any data that might come out of there doesn't fall into the senior care data. It's also important to note that, for example, Genesis, it is also short-term and long-term care. So we only get data reported for folks that have officially a Westfield residence. So in some cases, in many cases, those folks might have if they're currently in short-term care, their permanent residents reside elsewhere, so they don't get reported in the Westfield cases. But Megan is in touch with all three of those facilities on a daily basis. There are, across the state, there's significant challenges with both staff who are falling sick, as well as the care of those patients. And I think
about 40%, Shelley, across the state of cases are
that's right.
Long-term care facilities, something like that, right?
Care. Yep. And they're obviously vulnerable. They're exposed. And you can imagine, they're not letting visitors in. It's, I just try to imagine what it must be like how frightening it must be to be in one of those facilities where the staff is sick, that you're not getting the care that you're accustomed to. You can't get visitors. In many cases are saying they can't come out of their home and they're getting food delivered. It's heartbreaking, really. But our regional health, they're aware, they're in touch, they're doing the best they can under a really crisis situation for those long-term care facilities. So that's the update on where things are today. We are flattening the curve, and obviously there's lots of questions about what we do and when. As far as reopening things, we're clearly going to follow state and federal guidance. I do follow science. I believe in science and the facts. I've talked to the schools pretty regularly to understand, what's happening there. And I don't really like to speculate because I always like to deal with the facts in front of me. So we could all speculate, and I think we're all very probably aware of what it is, but we want to do it safely, but we want to do the need. I would like to be at a point where I feel like we could reopen the parks. So that would probably be an at least initial priority for me, and we'll see what the trends are over the next week, I think, but I would like to be able to reopen the parks as an initial first step.
Regarding schools, my understanding is that schools are officially closed to May 15, and then the governor and others will make announcement about what happens going forward after May 15. That's still a question mark, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
and in my household, I have a freshman in high school, and I have 2 college kids who are all home, all learning remotely. And obviously the college kids aren't going back. Remains to be seen on the high school. And there's a lot of questions too about, even fall enrollment. And even if the youth population seems somewhat immune to some degree, at least to the more severe cases, causes, symptoms of the virus, you know, it's the exposure that they could, as silent carriers, that they could bring to, you know, faculty and workers and so forth. So that all has to be in the consideration. So
thank you. As we move to the next, please, I know I speak for everybody on this call, to please ask you to thank on behalf of all of us, first responders, fire, police, healthcare workers, and of course, we all appreciate what the grocery people and the garbage pickup and everybody who's out there on the front line. And
right.
Whenever you have contact with those first responders and people, please let them know that there are a lot of people on this call who are very grateful to them.
Will do. And they're feeling the love from the community for sure. It's been amazing. Good. And I will say, just from Westfield's perspective, we have been very fortunate in terms of, even in our police department, we had 3 confirmed cases. They were all mild and they're already all back at work.
That's very fortunate.
We're incredibly fortunate. We have 2 DPW guys who are self-quarantining, not because they had symptoms, but they had possible exposures. So I like, knock on wood, we are incredibly lucky so far that we haven't seen what we are afraid of in terms of, you know, that, but they've also been very diligent about managing and being,
and you stay safe, you and your family.
Yes, you know, I haven't left my house, I feel like, in a month, other than you know, like all of you, you know how it is, walking my dogs, and I'm on the phone quite a bit, but other than that, so but yeah, so I think obviously we need significant number of tests. Would love to see how what this antibody testing does. And in New York's rolling out aggressively, and I'd like, you know, I'm optimistic, and I'm very proud. I don't know if you've read about, you know, Rutgers has come up with the first saliva test, which if that could scale up would be transformative.
Very, very exciting. Very exciting that it's happening right down the road. Nice, nice. Something to be proud of. Somebody, that's me. Somebody called me. So let's move forward. I'm confident that this crisis is going to subside, and eventually we're going to feel an increased measure of security through vaccines. So before the virus hit, Shelley, you and town leadership started to not only talk about, but slowly even unveil some exciting plans for the town of Westfield. Would you share with us your vision, because there is a future, and it might take a little more time now, but it's very, very exciting. I can't wait for folks to hear about that. And then we want to save our last 10, 15 minutes for questions and comments, but it's all yours.
Absolutely, thank you. And it is actually a very exciting future. Let me just give you a little bit of background, because it's a setup to, I think, where we're going, and I think it does require a little bit of explanation. So, you know, one of the things when I really became mayor and I started digging into kind of our budget, and I ran for mayor I'm a business person, I ran for mayor really all about to drive the economic vitality and prosperity of our town. I mean, that was my wheelhouse. I like to fix things. I like to fix big problems. And I was very excited when I ran, because when I looked at a town where I had lived for 25 years, all I saw was untapped potential, and I was frustrated by it. And if the town I felt was running on all cylinders, you would never see me in the seat today. It was only because I saw a huge opportunity that I felt wasn't being leveraged. And so, and I had a lot of hypotheses about what was happening based upon my own observations and my own personal experience. But once I became mayor, I actually learned everything I thought was not only true, it was more true than what I had realized. And let me just give you a couple of examples. And it's related to budget and taxes and then our future. Our town is reliant on residents for the majority of our revenue. 90% of our revenue comes from individual property owners. That's the highest percentage in the county. And we have a very limited commercial tax base, as is evident probably to everybody. We're not Summit, we don't have Celgene or Overlook Hospital, we don't have commercial business like Clark or others. And that was really the intent of our forefathers. They, you know, it was this kind of residential, non-commercial, you know, suburb. And unfortunately, I mean, that worked for a long time, but it's really stymied our ability to grow as we become increasingly reliant on residential property taxes to actually deliver the services that we all deserve for the high taxes that we pay. And it's compounded by the fact for every dollar we get, we only get 16 cents of that as a municipality. The schools get 60%, the county gets 24%, and listen, that I have my beef with what we are the largest contributor to the county in terms of total dollars, and I believe we get the least in return. So it's a conversation that we can have for another day. I agree, and I speak to the county about it regularly, but it is what it is. And in the meantime, we get 16%. So you can imagine for us to be able to deliver on the things that we want to see, whether it's improvements to our parks, improvements to our streetscapes downtown, improvements to the services, whether it's roads or curbs or whatever it is that's important to you, when we're only getting 16% of the dollar, you can imagine for us to see any kind of meaningful change to improvement in those town services, your taxes would have to go up kind of exponentially for us to take our 16% scraps and be able to do something with it that's meaningful to you. And that's just not okay. And it's not sustainable. So I haven't seen a way out of this conundrum that we're in. And then when you get into, so of that 16%, we collect about 20, we get about 20, that's 16% equates to about $25 million. Our budget is about $45 million, give or take. The other $20 million that we get that's non-tax related, it comes from things like certainly parking revenue, but a big reliance on things like parking tickets, court revenue. We are getting, I don't have to tell you about what our parking ticket issue was downtown, because it was becoming an increasingly reliant source of revenue for the town, which undermined what we are trying to do to solve our downtown. Teardowns. We all complained about all the teardowns. Well, we were making a ton of money on these permits, demolition permits. So it was this conundrum, like, yes, how do we save the character of our town and wean ourselves off of revenue that actually undermines who we claim we want to be, right? So, and a lot of construction things. So we were becoming very reliant on revenue that was undermining kind of our quality of life and, quite frankly, our neighborhood character. So and road openings is another thing. We were making a lot of money on road opening permits. So anytime someone wanted to come in and do utility work or construction, we're doing new homes and they're tearing open our roads, we were making money on road opening permits. And so, so you can imagine, especially after we paved 20 miles of roads last year, that we put in for a temporary moratorium on road openings until we could figure it out. And come up with a solution that enabled the necessary work, but protected the significant investment of our community. But you know what? We lost a lot of revenue because of that. So what I see is we're in this transition period from weaning ourselves off of negative sources of revenue to one that goes towards more positive growth-oriented sources of revenue. And we're in that transition period right now. So in comes the future. Like, what are these sources of revenue, right? That can not only rejuvenate and revitalize our town, but also become positive sources of revenue that can be concurrent revenue streams over time. So what I discovered was that there's a lot of power in what we call redevelopment laws in New Jersey. And I'm going to apologize a little bit if I'm giving a little bit of a tutorial, but it's really important to understand because I've had to educate myself on this. I look around to the other municipalities, and because I hear it all the time. Why does Bridgewater have such beautiful parks and fields and we don't? Why is Fanwood looking so good with their streetscapes and their stuff downtown and we don't? Why is Garwood being able to do some things that we're not able to, not only just in terms of development, but in terms of amenities and things for the town. South Orange, Morristown has delivered an unbelievable renaissance over the last 5 years. Well, the New Jersey has these amazing redevelopment laws that Westfield has never, ever, ever tapped into. I actually think that we're probably one of the largest municipalities in the state, and I'd venture to guess we probably are the largest municipality in the state. I'm just hypothesizing, that has never tapped into redevelopment laws. And what that means is there's an official designation called an area in need of redevelopment, and that is something that's defined by the state. And what it means is it used to be called, I think, it was what they call blighted areas or something like that. And they moved away from calling it blight because it had all this negative connotation. They now have declared areas in need of redevelopment, and there's criteria like that you have to meet in order to actually qualify for that designation. Parking lots. Now it's one, if there's an area that actually enables some economic vitality or revitalization, that could qualify. So municipal parking lots now would qualify in this designation. And if you can get area in need of redevelopment designation, it opens up a lot of flexibility in terms of deals that you can do with developers that can actually make it more lucrative for the town. And let me give you an example. The 333 Central building, the one on, you guys know where that is, on South and Central. I'll be honest with you, I hate that apartment building. And I don't hate what it was, the use. I think that was an appropriately fine residential use. I don't like the aesthetics. I don't think it was the quality that we should come to expect from our town. And certainly as what I consider a gateway into Westfield, I think we could have done better. That was done without a redevelopment designation. And the beauty of when you do a redevelopment designation, it allows you to two things. One is it gives you complete control, the town, over the property itself. You can dictate architecture, you can dictate quality of materials, you can dictate like, you know, how much setback and sidewalks and greenscapes and all that kind of stuff. That's the first thing. The second thing is it enables you to agree to go into what we call a pilot agreement. Some of you may be familiar with it. It stands for payment in lieu of taxes. And what it means, instead of what you do is you look at the value of the property and you anticipate what the revenue is, and you come up with an agreement on what they would be paying you. And it's a recurring permanent revenue stream over 30 years. And the beauty of it is, instead of the town only getting 16% of that, we get 95% of it. And so if I use the 333 Central as an example, I think, which was not done with a redevelopment designation, nor was the Pan Am Cleaners building, nor was the car wash over by the high school. All three of them, in my mind, should have been redevelopment designations. We would have been able to confirm the quality of it, and we would have been getting more revenue. I think in 333 Central, we're only getting $77,000 from the current assessment. If it had been a redevelopment designation, we would be getting about $380,000. And that differential would have been 30-year revenue stream for us going forward. So what you learn, what I've learned, every positive development you've seen in other municipalities, whether it's parks, fields, building, they're all being done with pilot agreements. And we've never done it. So we have an amazing opportunity to actually use redevelopment as a means to not only lure very high quality developers to town to help us in this revitalization, but at the same time, develop some new recurring revenue streams. And what's important about that recurring revenue stream, and going back to my taxes, when we were reliant on those taxes that I mentioned, construction, road opening, whatever, those are all things that you find are at the whim of the economy, as we're finding now. When the economy tanks, what slows down? Construction, parking, all those kind of things. So what it requires, the town kept this very big surplus as a safeguard against that in anticipation of, and you could say that's smart. What I would say, in absence of other alternatives, it's smart. But if you are able to come up with more alternative permanent revenue streams, you could be putting that surplus to use to actually pave roads, you know, do parks and so forth. So that's that's the other thing about these pilots. It gives you this 30-year recurring revenue stream that you can count on so that you can actually put taxpayer dollars to work to actually make things happen for the town. So that being said, we've been talking a lot about our revitalization, and we finished the master plan. Hopefully you guys participated in it. And there are several things, recommendations that came out of the plan. Not what I said, it's what the public said. And what the public told us is that they want to fix they're prepared and ready to fix our parking problem downtown. And that they're okay with they're okay with us moving forward to a solution to figure that out. They're also okay with density downtown. Now, density, as you know, means, whether it be apartments or people living. People do not object to density. They object to density when it's in their backyard. They are okay with more density in our downtown, which whether it be through residential or commercial, meaning employers. Because the way you fix our downtown is by you put in what we call walking wallets. And those are people who are there at all hours of the day and in the evening, who are eating in our restaurants and shopping in our stores. There was no magic bullet when people would say, well, just get this store or put this store or lower the rents. Unless you fundamentally fix the root of the problem, those were all very temporary, and it was just going to keep us on this hamster wheel. We need to fix the fact that we lack foot traffic, lots of foot traffic in day and the evening, and that needs to be fixed. So we just, at our March 10th council meeting, and then at our April 4th planning board meeting, we now have a redevelopment team. We've hired a redevelopment planner, a redevelopment attorney, and the planning board sent to them to ask for a study, because you first had to do a study to see if the 8 municipal parking lots, the Lord and Taylor properties, and that's not just where the building is, but the 2 parking lots across the street, as well as the Rialto building, qualify as areas that need redevelopment. So this redevelopment planner now is working on this study, and there's, like I said, to see if it meets the criteria that is laid out by the state, and they'll come back with a final report. My guess is in June or July, telling us that whether they do or do not. My sense is that they do. And that gives us license to start working with developers to understand what the art of the possible. That doesn't mean we're going to develop on all of that property. But what you want to do, especially with all 8 municipal parking lots, if we're looking at a parking solution, we didn't want to presuppose what the parking solution is, which would have been the case if we had designated just 1 or 2. We wanted to look at all of them so we can look at our parking challenges holistically and say, this is the solution here or here or here. And it might not be just one big solution. My guess is it's going to be a bunch of smaller solutions. So that's in the works now. There are some folks that have investors and developers that are very interested and are committed to Westfield, even in light of what's happening right now. Now, the other thing that we just did at our last council meeting, and this is important too, there's also a separate designation called areas in need of rehabilitation. This doesn't qualify for those 30-year pilot agreements I mentioned, but this is a way to incentivize people to invest in their properties. What it does, it enables people, and particularly we're focused on the downtown property owners, to invest in upgrading their properties. And what it does, it gives them some tax abatement on the value of their improvements for 5 years. So it's the town would continue to get what we've always gotten, but it labels them to grow in. So let's just say, I'm making this up, someone spends $1 million to improve their properties, and maybe they've gone up a floor, they've renovated the whole thing. So their taxes then would go up on that value immediately when they get the new CO for their investment, but yet they haven't had the opportunity to generate the revenue from those improvements yet. So it discourages people from doing the improvements because they feel like they're going to be on the hook for the improvement taxes before they get the benefit. So the area need of rehabilitation gives them 5 years to grow into that. And there's lots of different ways you can structure it, but it could maybe go up 20% a year, maybe not at all. But then at the end of the 5 years, they start paying the full amount. but the town always gets what they had intended. So we have declared our entire special improvement district. We are working on it in area need of rehabilitation. Our property owners love the idea, and it's what every other, South Orange, for example, they have declared their entire town in area need of rehabilitation. So has Metuchen. So we actually are looking at it downtown for our property owners, but you could argue at some point it could be a designation that we could work in some of his areas with historic homes to incentivize residential people to improve their older homes and give them some tax deferrals, so, as opposed to having them torn down. So we figured we'd start with our special improvement district area. That will also be a designation that comes through in probably June or July, and then we're ready to rock and roll with everything.
That's great. One marvelous presentation, and we're.
Hope that was clear. Yes.
And we hope it comes to be. Jackie, do we have any questions or comments on the chat room at this point? And I want to invite people to put some in now. I'll look as well, and let us know if you have any comments or questions for Shelley Brindle. We welcome anything that you might have. Give you a moment. While people, here we go.
So we could start with one question that we had. So I know that we kind of addressed this a little bit earlier, but if you want to go into a little bit more detail about the closing of the parks, and why, you know, we understand why the playgrounds and such need to be closed, but why do the open spaces of the parks, why do those need to be closed?
Let me tell you what, that was a heartbreaking decision for me for many reasons. I'm an avid tennis player. I'm at the parks all the time. It was really in consultation with our police chief. The concern was, in spite of 95% of the people doing appropriate social distancing, they were still breaking up like groups of 10 or more in various areas of the park. And their concern was, once the county closed their parks, they were worried that all those folks, and I was going to Lenape and so forth too, and I saw how many people were there on walks. Their concern was the folks were going to come from Lenape and everywhere else and crowd our parks as well. So yeah, that one was a really tough one, because now is the time. But you know, I also tried to provide some perspective. We are very fortunate that we live in a town with wide streets and there's fewer cars on the streets. So, you know, I think there's more walking capability. Most people have backyards. But I will say, in terms of reopening, that would be my first priority, is getting the parks back reopened. And I think I would only do that in consultation with the police. And I will say, I did get a lot of questions about, people were saying, well, why don't you just find people who are doing that? But it, that kind of, to me, we weren't trying to make money or get fine revenues off of this. I was concerned that once you find people, it's too late. Like, if you're finding people, it means the behavior is already happening. So we just wanted to stop creating anything that would actually enable even things to be misused. But yeah, that's a real tough one. And I hope to reopen. The one I kind of weird opportunity it provided is Emanu-El. We're in the process of repaving and redoing all the walkways and pathways in there, which was going to be done anyway. It was paid for out of last year. So it is providing an opportunity for us to do that. And we are reseeding fields 1 and 2 at Tamaqua. So even if we reopen, I don't think we'll be able to open those fields for Tamaqua probably until the fall, because they're being reseeded. But Emanu-El, hopefully when it opens, people are going to be like, wow, we've been at work. So anyway, yeah, that was why it really was done with the input from our health, our police chief, and our regional health director.
I do want to comment. There are a number of comments just thanking you for your leadership, doing a wonderful job. Thank you for your strong leadership. Jackie, while you're pulling any others together, I do want to, let me just ask one question from Marvin Gersten. Are downtown property owners giving their tenants any rent relief due to their businesses having to close? Are you familiar with that? What's happening there?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I should comment. So we have a new downtown DWC executive director, Bob Zuckerman. And if you haven't, he literally started like April 7th in the midst of all this. And I say this because we are incredibly fortunate to have Bob. Bob, he used to be the executive director of the business improvement director on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And then he was in South Orange. And now he's also president of downtown New Jersey. So the beauty of having Bob now is he has this insight into what's happening to downtowns all over the state and what's transpiring. Regarding rents, there are some incredibly generous. There's not anything legally that we can do. As you know, that nobody can be evicted on the residential side. We're working on the commercial side. There are some business owners that are being incredibly compassionate and generous, and some that aren't. And we can do our best to cajole and everything else, but it's not something that we can dictate.
Okay. Jackie, do you want to share, or I can read some of these off here as well. Jackie, do you have one for us?
Yeah, I have a quick and easy one. Is the Westfield Registrar of Vital Statistics open to drop off a wedding license?
Oh,
That's a happy. That's a happy one.
That's a happy one. Yes, and we are accepting those things, and we do have. Even though it's closed, I'm just trying to figure out the best. You know what you should do, because the town hall is closed. I would take it to the police department and drop it off there. And our town clerk is still working. We do have key essential personnel working to keep the business opening. And I heard that they're allowing to do like virtual weddings or something. So my suggestion was drop it off at the police department.
Okay, I'm gonna share this one from Steve Barkan. Why do you think it took so long to do redevelopment? What's happening with the South Avenue site where the motor vehicles inspection was? And is redevelopment being used there? And give a reaction to last week's leader editor advocating small, affordable, single-family homes instead of affordable units in multifamily buildings.
All right, so let me take the first.
This comes from Steve Barkan, who's got a little bit of a history of land use legal work for much of his fine career.
He sure does, and he's fantastic. And you know, and I like having people like Steve on calls because they can check me and say if I'm honest or not. If I should say I'm always honest. If I always have my facts straight. You know, I asked the same question about redevelopment. I said, why? I just couldn't understand why we had never, ever done it. And what I heard was that there was this, in the old days, you know, it was attributed to blight. And I think nobody wanted to publicly acknowledge your town was blighted, but that has evolved. Then I had heard it was because they felt like redevelopment would lure unwanted development to town. So basically, when you declare an area of redevelopment, you're inviting people to come in. But what's crazy about that now is that we had to do an affordable housing agreement, right? And which we did. And I'll be honest with you, I think they did as good of a job. I think we have one of the best affordable housing agreements that we could have gotten. So my point about redevelopment is, and all those three sites that I mentioned, 333 Central, the cleaners, and the car wash are all part of our affordable housing settlement. So my point was, well, once we came up with an agreement and the development was happening anyway, right? Why wouldn't you leverage it to do something that was in the best financial interest of the town? And so that's really all I could understand. So, and I'll be very upfront. There is an issue with pilot. When I mentioned that the town gets 95% of the pilot, and one thing that's very popular about that is that the county, which typically gets 2 or 24%, only gets 5%. So, you know, that's a big thing. The schools are not part of the pilot agreement. And I do think there are opportunities to do separate creative agreements with the schools between the town that we can make sure that they are never feeling that they are not getting, you know, that they are inundated with, they aren't getting a fair reflection of the value and any kind of burden that it might put on the schools. So, and there's examples of that happen all over the state, but that's what I understand. The second question was the DMV site?
Yes.
And you're talking about the one off of Windsor Avenue, that one?
I'm sure, South Avenue.
Yeah, it's that old, like, that's funny, that's a state-owned site. Believe it or not, we've actually reached out to the state several times about the interest in selling it because it's completely unused. And they actually are not interested. So as of now, there's nothing that's going on there. But it is going to be interesting because the development that I mentioned on South Avenue, it's the first redevelopment one. It's where the old Sewell's is, you know, by Garwood on the South Avenue border near Garwood. It's an elite property development. That one has been designated area in need of redevelopment. It's right around the corner from that DMV site. So I don't know, maybe that'll provide an opportunity to transform it, but they have not been interested in doing anything with it.
There have been some pieces in Westfield Patch and others about rumors and this and that about the Lord and Taylor property. Is there anything you can share with us about that property at this time?
Yeah, one of the very first things I did after I was elected was reach out to Lord and Taylor, and then which led me to conversations with their parent company at the time, Hudson's Bay Corporation. So much so I've been talking directly to the chairman of Hudson's Bay Corporation, Richard Baker. And my first conversation with him was in December of 2018. And because as a business person, you'd have to be naive to think, and certainly in real estate, it's always about highest and best use. You'd have to be thinking, they pay us over $500,000 in property taxes. You'd have to be naive to think in this day and age that 150,000 square foot building is the highest and best use of their property. And so I just wanted to make sure that if they had plans to evolve and change the use or the property, that Westfield had a seat at the table. I didn't want to get the phone call telling us that, by the way, that the Lord Taylor was becoming a Walmart. And I will say, in my conversation with Richard Baker, that was one of the scenarios, is that Walmart had been asking them about converting it to a Walmart. And you know what? There wouldn't be a darn thing that the town could do about that. It's zoned for that. It's allowed for that. But there's no way over my dead body. I will not have tried everything we can to make sure. And so the good news out of that conversation with Richard Baker has been a very encouraging, exciting, transformative conversation with them about the potential future of their properties that could solve and help support a lot of the things and the challenges that I laid out earlier. So don't yet know what it's going to be like. They were very interested in our master plan process. Where they understand our parking needs. They understand our comfort with density. They also understand our need for commercial employers. And when I say commercial employers, I mean like law firm, tech firm, biotech, highly, educated, like type A, type tenant type stuff. So they're very well aware. They also know we need a new firehouse. So that could be an ideal location for a new firehouse as well. So all of those conversations with them are on the table.
Great. Jackie, any other questions that we have here that you want to share with us?
Yeah, definitely. So you said that you like talking about the future. So, once this pandemic is over, can you give us a little bit of insight as to what it would look like to slowly start reopening the town, opening stores, opening parks, things like that?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, I think parks would come first. Like I said, in consultation with the police chief. But I think definitely, I don't want to give a timing, but I certainly hope as the weather gets permanently nicer in spring that we have the option to be able to be outside again in a safe way. The downtown, I think, I don't know. That's some good conversation I have to have with Bob. And quite frankly, the business owners are clearly going to follow state guidance on that. We have to. So, I think the issue, and one of the reasons we closed downtown first, the blessing and the curse of our downtown, it's a central gathering location. And so it's going to be something that, it's kind of what we want is in a normal circumstances. You want people gathering in town. You want it to become that village square. But for a while, I think we want to engage our businesses, but in a way that's not creating crowds. So that's going to be one that we're going to have to talk a lot about with our business, our central, after the state issues guidance with our business owners and so forth. But I want them to be back in business as soon as possible. Some of them, I will tell you, are going to be permanently, I think, altered. Well, there's going to be some, I think, that don't make it. There's some that I think have become very innovative, and I like to think that those innovations are going to be incorporated into their business model permanently. But I think that's something I can't even speculate about when or how. All I know is we want them open as soon as possible, a way that doesn't attract crowds.
Great. Jackie, anything else that we may have missed here?
Yep. So we have one question about parking. So is there any consideration about partially refunding or crediting parking lot permit fees as spaces that are not being used due to the stay-at-home orders?
Yeah, we got that question earlier, and unfortunately, the parking lots aren't closed, right? And so technically, if someone was going to work, they could still park in the permit that they paid for. So we're like the refund, comes in light of if we suddenly close something that someone was no longer allowed to access. I did talk to somebody though about employers have closed and are forcing to work from home. And I do think, I know from my old days, they offered offsets in terms of parking and so forth. So one of the folks I spoke to was actually going to talk to an employer about possibly see if employers would refund parking permits, since it was the employers that mandated remote work.
Thank you.
And by the way, I will just mention one thing that you didn't ask, but it's it's kind of related, and it is about the town's municipal budget. And we are actually very concerned, and I'm talking to all these other mayors and I know the bill that's, Congressman Malinowski mentioned on Friday, the bill that's being proposed now is intended to help municipalities like ours, because as a reminder, the town is the tax collector for everybody, right? And then we then have to pay, as I said, 60% of the schools and 24% of the county. By law, we have to pay them first, full 100%, irrespective of the amount of taxes we collect. So if our tax collection goes down, which I presume it will, people are going to be unemployed, we're still on the hook for paying out 84% of the full boat to the state and to the county and the schools. So you can imagine the concern we have about the cash flow and our budgets, so that we don't have to lay off first responders or town employees. And so things like that, about even parking permits and so forth, we're not quite sure what our cash flow situation is going to look like yet. So we're trying to be as conservative as possible. We've taken a slash to our budget big time, which we'll be revealing to the public, which we're still looking at, will be just, presented to the public on the 28th.
So let me understand, that 84%, is that 84% of collections, or it's not 84% of the total budgeted amount, because if you collect less, you pay less, right? It's 84% of tax collections.
Correct, but
right.
and yeah, what we owe them, yeah.
Yeah, I get
No,
it.
actually,
Yeah.
Rabbi, we pay them. They give us a bill based upon our assessment. We pay them what they bill us based upon what the tax assessment is for the town. So we could.
So if you collect less, you still have to pay them the full amount?
Exactly.
Oh my, that could leave you with $3.
Exactly. Which is why we're very, very, very concerned. And which is what some of that help in Washington is intended. Everybody is aware, but a lot of people have asked me if we are extending the May 1st property tax deadline. That's not something the town has the authority to do. It has to be done by the state. Well, the counties and the schools lobbied the state, and they didn't pass the legislation. So taxes are still due May 1st with a 10-day grace period. One thing we are looking at right now is what we could do to the interest rate on late payments. But it's tricky, and it's a challenge for mayors all over the country.
Yeah, that was actually one of the questions, right? And here's another one. With many highly experienced community professionals having extra time, can we tap into their know-how to get creative ideas to small business owners in town?
And that's a great question. And as a matter of fact, we're doing just that. We actually have a retail advisory board comprised of like former CEOs and others that are working with our small businesses in terms of helping them out. There's actually a guy I'm speaking to later who's in the commercial real estate business, and we're going to actually do a Zoom call with him and all the business owners as he talks about leasing and what it means and the businesses that are doing well. But yes, and I'll tell if anybody on this call has a skill that they think could be beneficial, definitely reach out to me and we'll let you know how we can put you to use for sure.
What's the best way to reach you, Shelley?
Just send me an email and put Mayor Brindle at westfieldnj.gov.
Yeah, Jackie, you got that? Mayor Brindle at westfieldnj.gov, is that correct? Okay, terrific. Got time for one or two more questions if there are any.
Yep.
Jackie?
So with the town hall closed, where should we be dropping off our property tax payments?
Ideally, you can mail them into 425 East Broad Street, but they're also in the police department. There is a collection for that you could drop. And it says tax collections that you could drop the payment in the police department.
Good. Jackie, anything else?
Those are all of the questions that I see. I see a lot of really great comments towards you, Mayor Brindle, about what an excellent job that you're doing. So we really thank you for the service and keeping the town spirits up. It's very much appreciated, and we really do feel that.
Well, thank you. I will say, I know it's a really challenging time, and I think I also have a privilege because I do see a window into the future more than most. I can't tell you, like, the timing for us. We're incredibly fortunate, the fact that we've just finished those master plans and park plans. We have a roadmap, and we do have very significant interested investors that not only are they not pulling back, they've talked about they want to double down on Westfield. So I think what I'm curious, I think this pandemic is going to fundamentally change a lot of things in our society for the good. It's going to change, hopefully, healthcare, education, how people work, sustainability, the earth. I mean, the earth is loving this, right? The planet. What I'd like to see is if we can't be very forward thinking about what these implications are and incorporate them into our future, and that we could be a role model for municipalities around the country about what a new future could look like. And that's what I envision, and that's the partner that I think we've got at the table with us going forward. And I'll just say this one last thing, because it's going to be really important. When we move forward on some of these very big things, we're going to need a ton of community support. And as you know, people are resistant to change. And the people that generally, those resistors are the ones that are often the most vocal, even if they are a small minority. And people who are supporters tend to just think it'll all work out or don't want to put themselves out there. I can't stress enough how important it is going to be to have public and community support for some of the new initiatives that are coming down the road. And so please, if you're one that's typically been on the sidelines, consider sending in letters to the editor, showing up at council meetings, talking to your friends, whatever it could be, sending me notes. But not only, I don't expect full agreement. We're going to need input from people that we need the community to help guide this process. So I'm just going to ask for your engagement to make sure that we're going in the right direction. So, so please, that would be my one plea of all of you. Stay engaged, let your voice be heard, and show up and get your friends to do the same.
Shelley, that's a beautiful call to service. I want to conclude with just a word about your leadership, which has been clear in this Zoom call. What you've combined, what you bring to the table, is a combination of values, Judeo-Christian values. I mean, you're a very committed member of the First Congregational Church, which of course is our buddies.
Yes.
We have this long partnership that goes back to the middle of the 20th century. So you bring really values of faith. You bring imagination, and you bring an ability to bring people together and to get things done. That's very special. We don't see that too often. So I want to express my appreciation. And when things get a little tough and you get a little tired of the challenges, I want you to know how much we appreciate what you're doing. It's not just a breath of fresh air. It's a bright light that you're shining on our community. And we wish you and all of us well, not only through this pandemic, but moving on to the future. It's been an inspiring hour and a quarter for me, and I'm sure for others.
And for me too.
Good. And we'll do this again. And I guess I'll just mention one last thing, and that is you referred to the exciting religious leadership that's in the community today. A number of wonderful young, middle-aged religious leaders in the churches, and of course at the temple, which you mentioned, and that's very exciting. And they too are gonna bring vision and joy and values to our community. So thank you so much, and thanks to all of you. Hope to see many of you tonight at 8 p.m. for the Temple Yom HaShoah program, and the others watch the e-blast. And stay safe, stay well, and look forward to shaking your hands and giving you all a hug when we're able to do that. Meanwhile, know that we're all one community and we are united. Shelley, be well. Thank you to all.
Thank you all. Stay well.
Stay well. Thank you, Jackie. Once again, Jackie Groscott, thank you so much.
You're welcome.